Thank you. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So welcome to this member development session for Children and Family Overview and Scrutiny. I'd like to thank the officers who have facilitated the online setup of this meeting. This meeting being online is not a formal decision-making meeting of the Council. However, it is being broadcast live and recorded, and the recordings will be available on the Gloucestershire County Council YouTube website for any members of the public to view if they choose. So please bear that in mind. I want to thank you all for coming. Andrea, do we have any apologies for absence?
No apologies received, Chair.
Right. I'm not sure if declarations of interest are legally required or not, but Andrea, but if members did want to mention anything, that's fine. I don't think it's legally required. No.
As it's only a development session, Chair, it's only when we get back into the formal committee meeting phase.
Yeah. Just as an opening remarks, I'd like to thank you, Andrea, for sending out the link to the action on ACEs, which will be available for members to view up until the 24th of June. And I'd like to encourage you all to look at that, and to remind everyone that we have a budget scrutiny session 9 AM on the 2nd of July, which will be online. Again, that won't be a formal decision-making body, but it will be there to brief members. I'd like to thank everybody who's come, but make a special mention for our ambassadors, Becca and Barley. I'm not going to say anything more other than to say that they have a short presentation where they'll be able to introduce themselves at a later stage. So I'd like to thank the members of the committee for coming, and also for cabinet members present for this session. You're very welcome too. Now, the first formal agenda item is the presentation of an overview of children's services. I believe Chris Spencer is unable to join us. So I think I'm handing over to Andy Dempsey.
Yes,
yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, so without further ado, Andy, can you go ahead with your presentation?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just bring the slides up on the screen. Can I just check everybody can hear me okay? Yeah. Okay, thank you. I believe members have had a copy of the presentation, and you've also had a copy of the statutory guidance as it relates to the Director of Children's Services and lead member, and also the LGA guidance on corporate parenting. What I've tried to do, Chair, is just put together an overview, but use those documents as a framework for this presentation. By all means, ping any questions or points as we go. And I've left some space at the end, Chair, for a Q&A. I don't think within this session we can possibly deal with the granular detail of the full breadth of responsibilities, services and functions that form part of the Children's Services Directorate. And what I'll do is, I'm not a person who reads the slides. What I'll do is use the slides as a jumping off point to explain how those duties translate into functionality and activity within the department. So perhaps, Andrew, if we could go to the next slide. For those of us with long memories, if we go back 10 or 12 years, there wasn't a Children's Services Directorate. What there was at that time was a education department and a social services department which serviced both adults and children. Some of the rationale for the development of a Children's Services Directorate firstly acknowledged that children's social care and adult social care were heading in different directions. the very different populations that they serve, the majority of our focus in children's social care is around the safeguarding of children, so the intervention in children's lives to secure their safety and well-being, whereas the adult social care agenda was directing much more towards an ageing population and the assessment of the threshold of need and the support that adults would need to deal with their increasing vulnerability and frailty. So it was less about the protection of vulnerable adults, although that is a feature. It was more about meeting the needs of an ageing adult population through the lens of social care, whereas children's social care was moving in the direction of intervention and the protection of children, and I'll come back to that. So the Children's Services Directorate acknowledged the fact that we were going in a different direction than adult social care, and also that there was an overlap between the work of education, early years, early help, and statutory social care. So the department, in many ways, is a structure or vehicle for the delivery of those duties that are set out in the statutory documents that you've got. And what I'll talk to as well is that distinct difference between Section 10, which relates to our focus on the well-being of all children, that universal offer, and Section 11, which is much more tightly focused on probably no more than 4,000 children at any one time in the county who are in need of statutory social care intervention. And that's quite a challenge that I want to come back to, because in effect the department is torn between two distinct views. One is the general development of all children, the universal needs, their personal, social, educational development, and at the same time a more intense focus on those children who are open on a child protection case, involved in the criminal justice system, where we're much more intrusively involved in their lives. And that does create a challenge that I want to come back to in this presentation. So the first thing to say, this first slide is just to give you an insight into some of the volumes of activity. And obviously the numbers shift at any one time. But what you'll see is the first thing, we've got around 130,000 children 0 to 18. So that immediately shows the type and scale of the volume of our work, because there are duties to ensure that children can access universal early years provision at ages 3 and 4, and also good quality educational provision across the county. Within that, you've got those children who may have additional needs due to learning disability or physical disability, and we've got around 16,000 children with special educational needs, and within that, 4,500 children and young people up to the age of 25 with an education, health and social care plan. I'll come back to that. We've also got around 11,000 children accessing free school meals. We've got around 1,400 children who are being electively home educated, and we've got around 90 children open to our youth offending service, which is the service to support children involved or at risk of becoming involved in the criminal justice system. So this first slide is just to give you that sense of, we've got that whole population focus within the department, and within that, children with additional sets of needs, be that criminal justice, electively home educated, access to free school meals by virtue of their economic circumstance, or additional needs due to their social, emotional, learning or behavioural needs or physical disabilities. To counterpoint with that, we've then got on the social care side of the business the focus on those children about whom we've got some concern. And at any one point, if we look at the larger of the circles there, our multi-agency safeguarding hub is the front door, the integrated front door with the wider community for anyone, be it a member of our community or an agency who's got a concern about the safeguarding of a child. And over the year, we will receive around 30,000 contacts into the front door. And every one of those contacts needs to be screened. A timely decision needs to be taken about the level of risk and concern about that child. And then we need to think about how we then respond. And I'll come back to again in that presentation. If you look down those other numbers, we've got around almost 800 children in care as of March. Those are children now that we are parenting, that the state is exercising either sole or shared parental responsibility. We've got 700 children who are open on child protection plans, and just over 1,700 children open on a child in need plan. Now, taken together, that's 2,500 children who are at home with their parents, but around whom we've got some level of concern, either about the potential for significant harm in relation to child protection, or some degree of need for children in need which require a statutory social work intervention. Alongside that, we've got 5,000 open My Plan or My Plan Pluses. This is the planning and assessment tool that we use for early help. And our early help work is below that continuum of need. By that I mean they don't need the statutory social work intervention at that stage, but there's some level of need that requires some support. And that may be led by school, it may be led by a health agency, or it may involve our family support service. And I'll come back to these numbers. So taken together, what these two slides show is that we've got a universal focus in the department, and then within that, a very targeted focus, mainly driven by the needs, risks and circumstances of those children. Some of it's situational, some of it related to their personal situation, their level of capability. Others, it's more contextual, i.e. they're in a home where we've got a concern about the capacity, motivations and willingness of those parents to safeguard or meet the needs of those children. Okay, what that results in, and this is meant to be very visually busy because it's sort of an insight into what goes on in the department. That results in lots of plans and strategies that we are required to have as a directorate. Some of these are statutory. For example, if we look at the Youth Justice Plan, there is a duty placed on GCC as the accountable body to bring forward an annual plan for the administration of youth justice in the county. We are required to have a strategy to plan school places and ensure there's sufficient capacity in the county. We are required to have a childcare sufficiency assessment, and so it goes. My reason in illustrating this is there are lots of interdependencies between these strategies, and part of the role or the purpose in having a single directorate is to tease out some of the interdependencies and sometimes some of the conflicts and dissonance between these strategies. So what we need to ensure is youth justice isn't only acknowledging the need to reduce reoffending or avoid involvement in the criminal justice system, it's also aligning with what we're doing around educational improvement, because the young people involved in the criminal justice system are often excluded from school or on a part-time curriculum or struggling with their education. So part of our strategic role and part of the role and duties placed on the department is to make sense of this activity and to ensure it coheres into a strategic, purposeful whole. And that's not always easy, because behind GCC as an arm of local government and behind these plans, they don't all track back to the Department for Education. So, for example, the Youth Justice Plan will track back to Home Office, and Justice Departments. Other plans here will track back to the Department of Health. And sometimes that intergovernmental coordination isn't all that it should be, and we have to tease some of that out at a local level. Okay, so I think I've covered this, but which children are we interested in? Well, we start at the top. We're interested in all children pre-birth up to 18. And for children and young people with additional needs or care leavers, those who are care experienced and leaving care, we're interested up until they're 25. Then it breaks down into those subsequent numbers. I think I've already covered, we've got around 5,000 open early help episodes. We've got around 4,000 open social care cases at any one time. We've got around 16,000 children with some form of additional needs. We've got a very small number open to statutory youth justice, which is a good thing, around 80 and 90 at any one time. And then you've got those more dynamic numbers of children excluded, missing education, open to alternative provision, and electively home educated. And those are more dynamic and fluid numbers. And I'll come back to how we track that dynamism in due course. Okay, now you've got the documents on the statutory responsibilities of the DCS and lead member. What I'm going to do is just go through those elements section by section, not to read back to you the duties, but to illustrate, not exhaustively, because we probably haven't got time to go through them all in granular detail, but perhaps by way of illustration and by way of a starter for our conversation and your development going forward. And many of the members through your previous involvement will know some of this, so forgive me if I repeat myself. Let me just cover off some of the sort of highlight issues. So, first one is our duty towards vulnerable children and young people, and you'll be aware that our role as corporate parents, we've got children who are in our care or care leavers. And our responsibility, much as any good parent would be, was say, how good's their educational offer? How good's their health offer? So the role of corporate parents is to advocate and agitate for the wider system. And that's not only holding the DCS to account, that's looking across at our health colleagues and our educational colleagues to ask questions like, what proportion of our children and young people in care who are care leavers, what proportion are getting a good health offer and a good educational offer, and what do their health and educational outcomes look like, not only in comparison to other children who are care experienced or other children who are in our care, but just against the universal population. And then drill down into some of the additional offer that should be in place for those children through through Pupil Premium and Pupil Premium Plus. And that then takes you into scrutinising the work of the virtual school, for example. And what the virtual school does in educational terms is put a framework around all those educational providers and say what we'll do is we'll look at that cohort of young people as a school, as a distinct cohort across each year, and say how well is our offer doing, in meeting their educational needs. And that's quite a challenge, because remember, many of the young people who come into our care will have had some real difficulties in their home. That's why we've intervened and decided that the best way to meet their needs is for the state to parent those children. However, it's not enough for us to say, well, they've had a really difficult time and therefore we're struggling to meet their educational needs. It's the other way around. They've had a really difficult time. We need to respond to that and make sure they get a premium offer through Pupil Premium and Premium Plus to make sure that their educational aspirations are met. Picking up on a couple of other points, I've already outlined the fact that we've got around 16,000 children with some form of additional educational need due to a physical disability, educational need, or social, emotional, mental health issues. And we are a bit of an outlier in some respects. We do have a higher rate of education, health and care plans. And this can be and this is not uncommon across the county, across the country. The revisions to the Special Educational Needs Code and the creation of educational health and care plans, which replaced what was the previous statements of special educational needs, some of you may be familiar with, have sort of upped levels of expectation in this area, and it has driven a tendency towards both schools and parents seeing the education, health and care plan as a sort of gold standard and solution to meet the needs of all children with an additional need. One of the key roles and key pressures the department faces is managing that demand and expectation. I'll also pick this up with one of the nuances. The funding to meet that need sits within the school's forum and what's called the higher needs block within the school's funding arrangements for the county. Now, the local authority facilitates the school's forum, but is not a decision maker in that process. So we are left with, and this will be a continuous theme through the presentation, is that we are left with the accountability to make sure the children's needs are met, but the funding sits within the higher needs block managed by Schools Forum, which is made up of representatives from the schools and other sector leaders within the education system. Picking up on a couple of the others on this slide, alternative provision. We are under a duty as the local authority to provide an educational offer within 5 days of any child becoming permanently excluded from the education system. And our alternative educational provision in many ways can be conceptualised as the local authority school. It sits outside of the mainstream education system, but is there to provide a continuous educational offer for those who have been excluded or were seeking to reintegrate because they've come out of the school through the fair access arrangements and were awaiting another mainstream educational place for them. So it's very much our offer. It is designed to meet the needs of some complex and vulnerable young people, and it is always, a really challenging area of provision, because what we don't want is alternative provision to become, in effect, a route out of the education system and a dead end. It needs to have a dynamic relationship with the sector as a whole, so it restabilises and re-socialises children back into an educational offer. Final one on flag is youth justice. GCC is the accountable body for the administration of youth justice in the county, and we have a local youth justice partnership board which I chair, which brings together the other statutory partners, police, health and probation, and a wider set of relevant agencies. It's small numbers in terms of the numbers of young people open at any one time, and fortunately very small numbers in custody, but a really important part of our provision. There's quite an overlap with children's social care, and it's always a concern about whether our social care offer and our youth justice interventions and our education and health interventions all co-align. So if I can put it in one way, we don't re-problematise children. So in effect, children are struggling, they are behaving in a certain way because they've been neglected and they're hypervigilant or have experienced ACEs. So when they respond to institutions, they respond in a certain way. We need to be able to anticipate that and not re-problematise those children and then inadvertently and unintentionally accelerate their involvement in the criminal justice system. So that's quite a challenge. And that relates to our prevention and early intervention work. And we have a very, very good prevention offer in the county through Children First. Some of you will know, very effective at intervening early, where young people are getting involved in ASB, low-level criminality, or struggling to maintain a school place. So I'll move on there because I am getting through a lot here. So I don't know whether people want to have the discussion at the end. Fair access to services. This is a big one. There are few issues more sensitive to parents, and my parent myself, than children getting the school place that parents want. So ensuring we have sufficient, good quality educational offer in the county is key. And you will know, members, some of you who, many of you have been involved over the years, that admissions day each year for secondary and primary are key signature dates. And you will know that we've got a very good team led by Claire Medland, very experienced in school place planning, and we do have very good figures around the proportion of parents achieving their first preference place. But again, what we need to be clear, the local authority no longer commissions additional school capacity. That duty sits with the Regional Schools Commissioner. We work very closely with them. So although the residual accountability sits with the local authority, the levers we pull are limited. It comes through collaboration, working with the Regional Schools Commissioners, academies, multi-academy trusts. And I think we've got a very strong record on that. Home to school transport, I will touch on briefly. Statutory duty to provide if children live beyond a certain distance from their nearest available school place, or if they have additional needs. Huge pressure on this budget. It's a national issue. Over the years, we've stripped out any of those discretionary elements, so we are delivering our statutory obligations, no more, but that continues to be a big budgetary pressure. Another one I'll point to is high quality early years provision. We have a very good early years team led by Sarah Hilton. This is a huge part of the system in Gloucestershire that's often forgotten. It's £33 million worth of activity or thereabouts, involving around 800 providers, combination of childminders and nurseries, the vast majority of which are private or voluntary settings. We don't commission them, but we do have a duty to ensure we have what's called a sufficiency, rather like our school place planning role. And you'll see that at the June Cabinet, we've got the current childcare sufficiency report going through. It's a very good document, and perhaps one that if members, all members have not seen that, we could circulate that after this meeting. I won't highlight, I'm conscious of time, members, we can come back to others. Children's participation, I think we've got a good record there through Future Me and the youth representatives. You're hearing from the ambassadors later. It's always a challenge, but I think there's some fantastic things going on in Gloucestershire around that, and you'll hear from the ambassadors later. Andrea, educational excellence, I won't say too much about this other than, again, we're left with the accountability around the educational quality and offer in our schools, but we don't have direct intervention powers and require to work with the Regional Schools Commissioner and schools collectively to identify and intervene in those schools that are underperforming. One of the things that Chris and I have been working on is the development of an educational improvement board with the Regional Schools Commissioner, and I drafted an educational baseline document, which I'm not sure whether members have seen that yet, been very well received by heads as a sort of starting point for the conversation going forward. What I would say is the relationship with schools has been turbocharged in a positive way by COVID. What schools have really welcomed from the local authority and health partners and others is the degree of collaboration and support they've been provided with through COVID, which has really changed the conversation around local relationships. The support around PPE, the identification and tracking of vulnerable pupils, the test, track and trace, the ability to develop a testing capacity, the good work through Sarah Scott's team and Public Health, the CCG, that's really coalesced into a new conversation around how we work together on educational matters going forward. We had the first meeting of this sort of emergent education improvement board in May. There'll be another one in July. We've got the Regional Schools Commissioner involved, we've got the diocese involved, we've got the chairs of the schools partnerships. Chris is facilitating that meeting, with the DCS. So I think that tension between having a duty but not the powers has been overcome by the fact that we've got a clear relationship, and what I would say we've constructed a consensus of leadership. We've decided how we'll do these things without directive levers that perhaps were there pre-2010. Pulling all that together, I think what that speaks to is the Section 10 duty placed on Chris and the lead member to coordinate the work of local partners around wellbeing. And what we mean by wellbeing is just the personal, emotional, social, educational and health development of all children. Just the general well-being, the way children feel and the way they develop, as opposed to the Section 11 duty around safeguarding. And it's important to note on that Section 11 duty that working together 2018, which is the framework for child safeguarding, changed significantly and now involves the police and CCG as statutory safeguarding partners alongside the local authority with a shared and equal duty to safeguard children. That is a huge change, because prior to working together 2018, it was a sole duty placed on the local authority, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Final one in your statutory guidance was around leadership and partnership, and how that translates. I've captured some of the main partnerships here. We didn't really have an effective children's partnership, and if you look at those localities that are really driving high-level aspirations for all their children and young people, they generally have a children's partnership. Again, one of the anomalies is the residual duty under Section 10 remains, but in 2010, the duty to have a children's plan and partnership was removed. I don't think you can deliver on this unless you have a partnership, and we've now got the Children's Wellbeing Coalition, sits under the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is picking up that mantle. We've also got the Children's Safeguarding Partnership, which brings together the 3 statutory safeguarding partners and the broader range of what are called relevant agencies. Those are agencies with a continuing duty to safeguard children under Section 11, so schools, probation, et al. I think we've got very good arrangements on that. Our published arrangements have been, subject to some scrutiny, and by the national panel around what we call rapid reviews, we've got some very positive feedback. I've spoken briefly about the Education Improvement Board, which is starting to take off, and that will be very much focused on structural change within the education sector, plus educational outcomes, best use of resources. And to give you a little insight into what that might mean in practical terms, if we go back to that number of electively home-educated children, it's 1,400 children. If we assume that if we turn that into lost income into education, that translates to around 5 million in an annualised level of income through ARPU, the pupil-weighted allocation schools will get, because an electively home-educated child, the family don't receive any resource. So when we think about electively home-educated children, some children, their needs may well be met for a variety of reasons through electively home education. But one of the things we look at in the Education Improvement Board is that's also lost investment into the education system, and we need to think about resolving those tensions. Youth Justice Partnership Board, I've touched on. The DCS and lead member are statutory members of the Health and Wellbeing Board. We also are members of Prevent, which is the part of the government's contest counter-terrorism strategy, and we also have what's called a channel panel, which I chair, which deals with potential, with individuals potentially at risk of radicalisation and becoming involved in channel. We're also involved in Adoption West, which is a 6-area adoption board, a regional adoption agency. We I chair the board at the moment. It predates my tenure, but we are the only regional adoption agency that's used a wholly local authority-owned company to deliver that, which brings its own complexities. And I know, Andrew, you will know all about that because you scrutinise Adoption West. I think it's made a good start, but it's quite a complex beast. And I'm moving on rapidly because I know I've talked at you for quite some length. I'll just touch briefly on working together. I think the bringing police and health in as shared and equal partners with a shared and equal duty towards the safeguarding in children has been a game changer. The current executive is chaired by Marion Andrews-Evans from the CCG, doing a fantastic job, and it's really brought that multi-agency whole system approach towards the safeguarding of children in the county. Beneath that, we have a management group which I chair, which is the sort of engine room to do the work, and beneath that we have a set of thematic subgroups looking at education, exploitation, performance, et al. We do have an independent scrutiny function, which is another creation of the change, previously delivered by Kevin Crompton. Some of you will know he was the previous independent chair, an experienced DCS, an ex-DCS and ex-chief exec. Hopefully he will carry on in the new year. And we also have a range of quality assurance and audit functions to scrutinise the work of agencies and schools through Section 11 and Section 175. Again, I think we've had a really good process over the current year. So I think we've made a very good start. Those arrangements only came into play in 2019. Sir Alan Woods has just done a review of those, published in May, which we're currently looking at, and a report will go to the GSCP executive next month. In terms of improvement activity, because you'll be aware we remain at Children's Services subject to government intervention. There's quite an architecture around this. We have a Children's Services Improvement Board, which is multi-agency, overseen by an independent chair, Andrew Ireland, meets on a monthly basis and scrutinises our performance and quality assurance work. We've got the Leaders Oversight Board, chaired by the Leader of the Council, that scrutinises progress internally in terms of infrastructure, all our corporate support, and we've had a good deal of corporate support. We have regular Ofsted monitoring visits, which some of you will know have now ceased. We had a focused visit in October, which was positive. The next time they arrive, that it will be full re-inspection. And in terms of tracking our progress, we have the Accelerated Improvement Plan, which is very much about action. The monthly report, monthly performance report, which you will have seen, hugely detailed document, runs to about 60 pages, got about 150 indicators in there. Our quality assurance framework is where we dip sample the quality of practice through case file auditing, and we've also got a set of service and team improvement programs underway. What we use our performance and QA to identify teams who are underperforming. They go onto the team improvement program, and our improvement advisors focus on those teams. And what I can assure members is, because I know you've been concerned about this, is the proportion of inadequate practice found through case file auditing is now consistently in line with target. We've been at 12%, 8% and 8%, I think, for the last 3 months. So that's a positive picture. But I won't, dress this up. We've still got work to do to make sure we can be confident going into our inspection. So pulling all that together, and I'm sorry if that seems a lot to take in at this point. Some of you are well experienced in this, so forgive me, I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs. I think the important points to remember are this. The DCS and lead member are in that basket of roles statutorily defined in a very prescriptive manner. They ultimately are where, when Ofsted arrive, they'll sit Chris down and say, Chris, tell us about the quality of practice. And ultimately all those duties and all that activity leads to a conversation that they would all also have with the lead member and other members around how effective is this activity for children and young people. GCC wears a number of hats, as well as being the deliverer of those services. Sometimes we commission services, our youth offending service is commissioned, our children and family centre are commissioned, but we remain accountable for those. We are also accountable for multi-agency activity. So the work around special educational needs and youth justice involves a wide range of partners, but ultimately we remain the underlying accountable body. So the chief executive, the leader, the council as a corporate entity, is accountable ultimately for the effectiveness of that multi-agency activity. And we are also a statutory partner defined in legislation for other aspects of safer of activity. So we are identified under the Crime and Disorder Act as a statutory partner for community safety. We're a statutory partner for child safeguarding. We're a statutory partner for youth justice. As I said earlier, despite those accountabilities and profound responsibilities, the levers to deliver the role are not always there. It does require collaboration, conversation and mobilising the system, often through the powers of persuasion and dialogue. The other thing I would say is when we looked at those demographics, the big numbers translated into small numbers, they're not mutually exclusive. Children's lives don't work like that. They navigate through those needs over time and due to complex situational factors. The children who end up in our social care system do so often through no fault of their own. It's the omissions and commissions of their parents and carers, which then brings in a conversation with adult services around the quality of mental health provision for their parents, the quality of drug and alcohol treatment services for those parents, the quality of psychosocial interventions for those parents involved in domestic abuse. So the effectiveness of children's services sometimes says something about the effectiveness of the wider system. And, I would hope through your work, and I know you have been doing this, it's looking at the wider system through the lens of children's services. And what we try to do is be situationally aware. One of the things we've developed, and I don't know how much members know about this, is we've developed a vulnerable children's data set, which enables us to ask questions like, how many children missing from education also have an additional educational need and may also be open to the youth offending service. So we can look at those children presenting multiple levels of need and complexity and start to think about the interconnectivity between our services so that we've got business processes that acknowledge children are presenting with multiple needs and can't be dealt with by a very siloed, compartmentalised offer. Otherwise, there'd be no point in having a children's services directorate. And that brings me to my final point, that ultimately our organisational form and business process need to proceed from the needs, risks and circumstances of children, not making our work comfortable for ourselves. That's not an easy challenge because this can be quite Byzantine in its complexity sometimes. And as an experienced DCS myself, and Chris is probably the longest serving DCS in the country now, it's not easy to unravel, particularly in a large county, because we're two-tier with all that brings around those interrelationships. So I'll pause there. I hope that's been useful, and I hope it's not meant to answer every question, but I hope I've anticipated some of the things that jump out from that framework that you've been provided with. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Andy, for that. I think that was, for me, it was, refreshing of stuff that we've done. For others, perhaps who are newer to the committee, there may be it may be quite a lot. I think there was quite a lot. I think of new stuff. I think perhaps for people to take on board. I'd like to ask you questions. Do you use the chat facility to put your hand up? Haven't seen any hands at the moment, but feel free. I very much will be watching carefully.
Down.
I have a hand. It's David.
Thank you, Andrew. If it's me, I mean, can I ask, what is the current trend with the numbers going into home school education, and what powers do we have to inspect, given that the numbers seem to be rather large?
Thank you, David. The trend is upwards, and that reflects a national trend. Our powers are to satisfy ourselves that the educational offer is meaningful and meeting the needs of the child. Where there are safeguarding concerns, if in effect, putting it crudely, David, we were concerned that the child had been withdrawn from school to avoid the gaze of agencies around the situation of the child, we can intervene through the lens of safeguarding. But it does reflect, it was upward before COVID, but COVID seems to have been a compounding factor across the country. Some of that relates to the anxiety of parents about the risks children might face in school from the pandemic. Some of that will ease as confidence grows, but it is an issue that we are looking at very, very closely.
Thank you, Andy. I can't see any other. Becky.
Hiya, thank you. It's a sort of semi-related question. You didn't mention children that are in independent schools. There's no mention of how many there are, and I presume you have very little overview of that.
Independent schools are included in those numbers, Becky, you're right. But what I would say is, in relation to our safeguarding duties, independent schools come fully within working together as a relevant agency. So the fact that they are independent schools does not matter at all in relation of our powers of intervention in relation to safeguarding in education. But they are obviously more independently minded in the extent to which they engage in our school improvement activity. If we had a significant concern about an independent school, either educationally or due to safeguarding, we would raise those issues respectively with either the Regional Schools Commissioner or Ofsted. The independent schools do engage in the schools' partnerships, but you're right, it's a more fluid relationship.
Thank you. Alistair, I have your hand.
Oh, hi. Apologies if it doesn't make sense what I'm asking, but I think it's slide 2 with regards to children missing. In quarter 4, there's 116. And in quarter 1, there's 108. And on the graph, it said not recorded. Sorry, would you be able to explain this graph and what the point is with regards to children missing, if that's okay?
I'll just bring up the slide.
So just the previous, that's the slide there, and that's the graph. Cheers, thank you.
Yes, what this slides, we have a variety of what we call different missing episodes. So they may be reported as missing from home, which is the larger number. They may be reported as missing from care or missing from school. So what we do is we track those missing episodes, engage with the children and young people, firstly to ensure that they are located and found, and then conduct what we call a missing interview to understand what motivated that missing episode. So what was going on in their lives to have prompted that missing issue, be that they've gone missing from home, they've been reported by their parents, or they've gone missing from either education or their care setting. So it's important because missing episodes like that can often be an indicator of exploitation or safeguarding concerns. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. My point is that sorry, I might have explained it properly in the question. There's 6 Gants to the 6 bars to the Gantt chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you've got other, which is there's 5, for example, in quarter 4 for other, but then there's 116 are not recorded on the RI form. I was just trying to get understanding of what's not recorded in comparison to other, if that makes sense, because that's quite a significant number. For example, you got 16 for missing from home, 5 other.
It is David, isn't it?
Alistair.
Alistair, yes. I wonder whether that bar chart's gone out of sync, because I think you're right. I think that number might be wrong on the bar chart. Can I take that offline and come back to you? Because I think that doesn't right. I think it's the way.
If you could do it didn't sync right with me. The numbers didn't sync right, and then it's quite a worrying number of figures. If that's the case, and I'd like to kind of explore. If you could come back to me on that, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I will do. I think I can say fairly confidently that should be missing from home, because it shouldn't be not recorded, because we do know the vast majority of our episodes. So I suspect as that's been cut and pasted over, we've lost the tracking of the numbers. But more than happy to come back. We do have a proportion that are not recorded, but it tends to be something like a quarter. Not in this case the vast majority or 3/4. So I will come back to you on that one.
Thank you. Yeah. Also, if it's okay, sorry to add to the list. When you do come back to that, would you better also give a graph detailing the amount of children and how quickly they come back after being reported missing? If it's 12 hours, 24 hours, because if those figures, obviously you said they're probably not correct. If they are correct, it's really quite concerning, the amount of people that are missing and the duration they are missing. If you could come back to that, I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, I can do, and there are very strict timelines around this. So we're required to conduct a timely return interview within 72 hours. So I'll come back both on that graph in terms of the proportion from home, education and care, and the not knowns, and give you a sense of what the subsequent timelines. What I can say is that the majority of children are located in the vast majority of cases very quickly, and the majority are offered a return home interview. But I'll come back on that. I think that's a transposition error, but I will come back, Alistair.
Thank you very much. That's very kind. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. And thank you for your questions. I have no hands up, so I presume there are no more questions on Andy's presentation. Andrea, we have another presentation, don't we?
Yes, we do, Chair. The ambassadors have a short presentation, which Lynn will share on the screen now, if that's what members want to proceed in that way.
Yes, please. So I'm assuming, Lynn, that the ambassadors will, Becca and Barney will introduce themselves, and then we can receive their presentation. Lynn, I think you're on mute at the moment.
Yes, I'm just attempting to share the presentation, but just as I've done it, it said connection interrupted. Citrix is trying to reconnect. So I know that there's been some ICT issues across the board this morning.
Lynn, is it going to let you stop sharing? Because perhaps Joe, if you're still there, perhaps you could try sharing, please.
That would be great. Let me just try it. I'll stop sharing.
I'll try and pop the presentation up from my end. The presentation is entitled, which one is it, Andrea?
It's the ambassadors one.
Okay, bear with me a second.
Thank you.
We'll just give it a couple more minutes, but if it's not possible to present for technical reasons, perhaps the ambassadors could just introduce themselves.
Yeah. Okay, so if I can just,
Okay. No, wrong one, Joe. Sorry, it's the other one.
Joe's here. Oh no, wrong one.
Perhaps if we go back to plan A while Joe finds the other one, and if Barney and Becca can just introduce themselves, that would be really good, please.
I think that would be good. Barley, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
Hi.
so hi, my name is Barley Chatterton. I'm 22. I have two cats called Gremlin and Jewel, and I live in Cirencester. I became an ambassador as I want to help change the way the system works for the better. Last year, I graduated from the Open University with a 2.1 in psychology, and my dissertation was focused on the factors that influence the social acceptability of violence against women. I want to go on to study forensic psychology and criminology at master's and PhD level due to inspiration from Dr. Jessica Taylor, a famous psychologist. This is my passion and focus, ending violence against women and children and challenging victim blaming. That's me.
Thanks, Barley. Becca, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. I'm Rebecca Lee Rogers. I've been an ambassador since September. I'm care experienced, both with good and bad placements, both temporary and long term. I became an ambassador mostly because I know that it's going to give me the experience that I need for my future career goals, which is on the lines of psychology and such, like Barley. I also have cats. I'm a bit more obsessive. I have 4 cats. I have Titan, Pandora, Moon, and Odin. Yeah, that's pretty much it, though. Okay, really. Oh, I'm 22 and I'm 23 next week on the 23rd.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Happy birthday,
Andrew. I think I can remember some of the presentation, and then I know Barley's got some bits to read, so I think we'll go from that. So I'll just do the role of the ambassadors on Scrutiny is really as yourselves is to be able to ask questions and to challenge based on their own kind of personal experiences. Oh, we're here. That's good.
There you go.
So brilliant. Joe, would you be able to kind of go on to the next slide, please?
There's my 2 cats.
Right. Hand over to you 2 now.
The screen hasn't changed.
Can somebody let me know which slide you want to present?
Joe, would you go back one in terms of the role of about ambassadors, and then I think Barley can talk to that. Just back. That's great. Thanks. So it was Barley. Becca, can you see that? No. Okay, Barley, do you want to talk to that?
Yeah, so who are the ambassadors and what's our role? So we are a team of 15 young people employed by Gloucestershire County Council to improve services all round. We're all aged 16 to 25. We've all received support from Children's Social Care or early help. what we do is we share our experiences to help other young people have a voice, and we support the development of services and influence strategic planning. If you could go on to the next slide, please. So our role as ambassadors on the Scrutiny Committee is to ask questions and challenge content and reports, and to share our personal views and experiences when appropriate. And the impact that we have had through this is, for example, the performance report was presented at a meeting, and it said on there that 95% of care leavers has had contact from their worker. We asked what counts as contact, because we disagreed that 95% of young people were being contacted. So we met with Andy Dempsey and produced a purposeful and reflective contact document, which was then shared with Andy Dempsey and Gail Hancock again. This includes various different points stating on how to be with a young person, like how the relationship should be, what kind of our expectations in a way, and what quality contact is. So, and then we presented it to all the 11 to 25 Parliament teams. And then we also changed the target. So originally the target was 55% for care leavers to be in education, employment and training. And we challenged this because it's currently at 50% for care leavers in education, training and employment. So there's only a 5% improvement. And it is now being raised to 75% to increase inspiration. Yeah, that's it.
Great.
Thank you. I think that's the end of the slideshow. Would you like me to stop sharing now?
Yes, please.
Thank you. And just to feedback on that, Becca and Barley, I think we appreciate the view from the ambassadors. One of the purposes of Scrutiny is to look at what the services that the county is providing, but from different perspectives. And I think if we didn't have your perspective at this meeting, we wouldn't have a rounded view. We wouldn't have a view from the inside, which is why I think that the whole of the Scrutiny Committee, certainly I do, value your presence and attendance, and I hope you'll be able to attend most or all of our meetings in future. So thank you very much. Good. Andrea, do we have any other formal business, or should we move to the work plan?
Unless members have got any more questions, anything they particularly want to direct back to Andy, having given those slides some thoughts, or any particular questions for the ambassadors, then I think it'd be really helpful to move on to the work plan, because it'd be really good to have a good discussion about priorities going forward. Andy is here who can advise on timelines for some of the issues. But yes, and I just see that Mark Mackenzie Charrington has just raised a hand as well, Chair.
Oh, I missed that one.
I've only just raised it.
I
just wanted to say thank you to Barley and I've forgotten, sorry, the name of the other ambassador. The one question I had was, are all the ambassadors from the same location? We spoke throughout Gloucestershire. Are the ambassadors who come from sort of rural backgrounds as well as the urban ones? So we get a much broader concept of what you feel should and should not happen.
Yeah, Becca or Barley? If not, I don't know if Lynn can answer.
I can answer if not.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that is the case. I didn't want to say straight away because I don't know exactly where everyone lives. But yeah, there's a wide range of experiences as well. So we've also got Henry, who's a birth child. So he's, I think it's like 11, 12 years in fostering care experience. yeah, and then Lynn, you can explain the rest.
Yeah, there's ambassadors for range of backgrounds, so care experience and had experience with child protection plans or child in need plans or early help or disability support, but also across Stroud, Cirencester, Gloucester, Cheltenham, Forest Dean as well. So yeah, across the whole of the county.
Good. Mark, does that answer your question?
Yes, no, that's fine. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Do raise your hand. If you think of questions afterwards, I'm sure the ambassadors will be at our next meeting, so there'll be another opportunity.
Chair, Alistair Chambers just raised his hand.
Right, Alistair.
Hello, Andrew. Thank you. So, yeah, reading on that presentation is really good. Thank you very much for that. It's great insight into the views of an ambassador and the reasons for it. So, was it 95% of people, if I'm reading it rightly, didn't have contacts? Is that correct, or what was that? What was that scoring from the presentation?
The 95% came from the performance report. So it said 95% of care leavers did have contact with their worker.
Oh, did. No, that's fantastic.
So yeah.
So
thank you very much, Barley.
So I think your question, Barley, was that 95% had contact of sorts, but didn't feel that was meaningful contact. So it was a question of defining what we really meant by that, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Cool. Good. And
do you know what processes have been put in place for the sort of the rest of the people, that the remaining 5% that didn't feel that they're having contact at all or relevant contact? Has there been sort of processes put in place to address that?
So we produced a document, the reflective and purposeful contact. We've gone round to all the teams. Well, not all of the teams just yet. So we're going around to like Cheltenham, Stroud, Gloucester, and it's being presented to the managers side of the team. I can't remember what it's called. So it's I think it's like a document policy that like that social workers are meant to follow. So it's just being integrated at the moment. But I don't know if there's anything more to say on that.
That's brilliant. It'd be interesting to know how that sort of that policy gets implemented and the success, and then a revisit of the survey to see if it's improved people's expectations of how they've been dealt with. So that's amazing. Thank you so much for that, Barley. That's great news.
Chair, could I just come in on that just to?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think, thank you, Alistair, and thanks, Polly. I think this really highlights the importance of scrutiny. What happened, Alistair, was that the performance report said 95% of care leavers had contact. Barley and Becky pointed out that could mean any number of things. That could mean somebody just coming in the office and waving over to them. And what we did, we sat down with Barley and Becky and the other members of the ambassadors to say, look, it's got to be more than that. Contact must be meaningful and purposeful. So what the ambassadors did was started to write a practice guide so that the number means more than just, counting somebody showing themselves in the office, but something more purposeful and helpful. And it was a good illustration of both how we work with the ambassadors to improve practice, but how scrutiny served to highlight that disparity between the numbers and the experience of our young people.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you, Barley. That's great news. Thank you.
Okay. I understand Linda raised her hand. Linda, did you have a question?
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant. It was just to say thank you very much to Becky and Barley for that presentation. And it's just a really timely reminder, I think, that when we're considering services, that we must include the people who are the recipients or are experienced in our deliberations, because they will know so much more than we do. No matter how much experience we think we've got, we never have got that firsthand, and it's important that we keep them central to any discussions and decisions, not just to be delivering things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, totally agree with you, Linda. I can't see any other hands. So I think it's time to move on to the work programme. Is this the point at which we stop the recording, Andrea?
No, this is part of the development session to have a discussion about priorities going forward, how they would like their work structured.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Do you want to bring the work plan or the draft work plan onto the screen?
Given my technical difficulties this morning, Chair, I would rather not. Members can get it through their mod.gov app or on the web page.
Okay. We'll just give members a.
I'm happy to talk through what has been planned for the first 3 meetings, if that's okay, while members just find their version of the plan. So this meeting obviously was structured to be an overview of children's services. Sorry, I'm smiling because now, on top of everything, Andy's phone has just decided to ring. And in order for you to meet the ambassadors have an ongoing relationship with this committee, you'll be pleased to know. What we had planned for the 15th of July, which at the moment I'm not sure whether it's going to be a virtual or a face-to-face meeting, and I'll keep you posted on that. We thought, given obviously, you're bound to be concerned about the current, position regarding Ofsted. So I have arranged for Andrew Ireland, who's the chair of the Improvement Board, to attend and to go through the improvement journey with you, and to actually also, there's a suite of reports that the committee in the previous council used to guide them through that, and also as part of that meeting for yourselves to question officers on the structure of those reports and how those reports can actually help you to identify where we're doing well, where we're not doing so well, and obviously, what we're going to do about it. The final meeting that I had scheduled in, and this depends on diaries being available, but I have put an early bid in for the newly appointed Director of Education and newly appointed Assistant Director of School Improvements calendars to come to Scrutiny on the 16th of September, because obviously education is one of the key areas that members are quite rightly concerned about. And I thought new directors coming in would give you a really good perspective on what they see as the what's good and help you identify risks going forward. And cover, obviously, that's going to be an overview, cover all of the issues around, most of the issues around schools, and actually help you get that broader understanding. So that's as far as I went, because obviously this is very much your work plan. So over to you. I did highlight some issues that I thought you might be interested in. So that includes obviously safeguarding children, child-friendly Gloucestershire, which is a project around what it says on the tin, basically making Gloucestershire a child-friendly place. The ACEs work, adoption and fostering, care leavers, children on the edge of care, youth offending service and youth service provision. And what I picked up from the ACEs conference last week, and I do encourage everybody to look at those videos because I was at the conference and it was incredible, is restorative practice and the Children First project about, as Andy's already said, about keeping children out of the youth justice system. Anyway, over to you.
Great, thank you for the work plan, and thank you for the suggestion of things that we will need to look at. The 25th of November, should we pencil in a possible consideration of an Ofsted report?
Chair, I think we kind of need to just remember that obviously Ofsted is it's there, it's impending, but I think it really depends on the outcome of that, because based on when we had the report last time, the council decided to hold an extraordinary meeting to discuss the outcome of that inspection. So I think we probably need to just see what happens when it happens, and in terms of if the committee did want to look at it, then my suggestion at that time would be an extraordinary meeting to make sure that the focus is just 100% on the report, and we can schedule that as and when required. But you currently have a couple of hands up. We've got David Drew and Ben Evans have got their hands up.
Okay, I can see both hands. I'm not sure of the order, but David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I mean, following on from what I asked earlier, I'd like to have a proper examination of homeschool education, to drill down who's getting homeschool educated, what level of supervision there is, and why they've chosen to go for homeschool education.
Right. Okay. Thank you, David. I don't think parents are required to supply a reason, actually. So I don't know if we've got a consistent database on reasons, but it sounds like a good topic, and it's one that has been sort of mentioned in the last council. But yeah, can we add that to the list, Andrea?
Yes, I've written that down, and obviously we'll get a brief overview of that when we talk to the new Director of Education in September. Andy actually has a comment he can make at this juncture just for some additional information.
Picking up, Chair, on David's early question, David, we do ask parents around the precise reasons, but you're right, they're not required in effect to explain why. I think it'd be very timely to look at this. This is getting a lot of national attention. And I think we're paying it close attention, not just as a department, but also as a safeguarding partnership. So I think it'd be timely for members to look at that and whether you're assured by what we're doing.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for that, David. Ben?
Thanks, Chair. First of all, just to say around Ofsted that I agree with the points. I mean, those of us who've been involved in the improvement board, as I was last month, you know, the stating the obvious, we don't know when the inspection will be. We all hope that it will be an improved result, but until that time, I think it's premature to sort of plan in anything with that. I think, from my point of view, I'd be really interested to look at and have a think about the balance between early intervention and prevention work in the county. The balance between that and work that isn't early intervention and preventative, more reactionary work. So thinking specifically around work with young people that may be preventative in nature, work done with 0 to 5s, and certainly with children in the first 1,000 days, and just having a look at and maybe getting senior officers in to come and talk to us about that balance, and for us to think about that and to ask questions around whether that balance is right in the county, and whether that, to use a horrible phrase, upstreaming services and finances may assist the council in both improving children's services, which of course we're all very keen that we do, but also potentially saving the council money over a longer period of time. So I'd certainly be interested. I don't know whether that's a particularly niche request, but I think it's something that sort of across the county would be really interesting for members to sort of have a look at and think about, and maybe even some comparisons with other counties.
No, thanks, Ben. I don't think that is a niche subject, actually, and I think it's something that was discussed in the last term of the council. So I think that would be probably of quite wide interest, actually, to examine that topic, Ben.
Chair, if I could just comment. Andy obviously has been sitting here nodding. One of the things for this particular topic we would need to do is obviously make sure we scope it out really well. So I'm thinking, obviously, because we know one of the things that we need to think about in terms of the work plan is, not everything needs to come to committee, or not everything needs to come to committee straight away. And I think this might be one of those occasions where it might be good to get Ben and a couple of other members together with a couple of officers to scope it out and put some clear lines of inquiry in place, and then decide, is this something that we want to come to, or you want to come to committee, or whether this is something you think would be better done through a task group or through a series of meetings, and just take a fluid approach on this one. But I've made a note of it. I would obviously be in contact with Andy and Chris, and in contact with Ben and the wider committee about any members that might want to be involved in a scoping exercise on that. I hope that's okay with everybody.
Yes, I'd be happy to meet up with Ben, socially distanced, of course, and relevant officers to do some scoping.
I was thinking that we could do a virtual meeting and and a few people and get it done. Okay. Yeah,
that would be fine. Now the other thing that we discussed, you and I, Andrea, was the possibility of a joint online briefing with the police and crime panel on organised criminal gangs.
Yes, Chair. And members won't be aware, but there has been an email exchange between the chair of the committee and senior officers. Concerns having been raised about the work that is going on to address this issue. So given that I work with the police and crime panel as well, I thought this was something that both committees could actually work together with. And obviously the police and crime panel hasn't met yet, doesn't meet until July the 7th. But we can be starting to put some work in place to actually look at a briefing. I would suggest possibly in the first instance of this, again, taking a more fluid approach to get things going, is to perhaps have an offline briefing to discuss, what are the main issues, what is being done, and obviously get the police as well as GCC officers around the table, and obviously lean on Andy for, who else might need to be involved in that. Okay?
Right, thank you very much. So finally, in terms of COVID stroke location of meetings, the next planned meeting is the 15th of July, which is clearly before we expect all the COVID restrictions to be lifted. Now, if that were to be not a decision-making meeting, my understanding is we could have that online. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Any meetings that are held virtually obviously cannot be decision-making. So today is fine because this is a development session. In essence, the meeting in July is also a development session because it's about getting underneath how you interpret the information about how we are doing in terms of improving our children's services, and obviously, utilising the time with the independent chair. I am aware, though, that there is a push to potentially come back face to face in July, but like I said, I won't know the outcome of those discussions probably until the end of next week, but I will keep everybody informed as to whether we will be face to face or virtual. Either way, the agenda would stay the same.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Andrea. And I guess the other thing to consider for September onwards, when we will presumably be meeting face to face, whether we could perhaps consider some alternative venues other than Shire Hall, perhaps Trevone House or one of the regional centres, in order to get out a bit more to meet some of the work. I don't know if that's been considered.
I think one of the things we can consider around this is that, because I'm a great believer in getting out and about and seeing for yourself how things work. So I think if, depending on the topic, you know, it would be a good idea. So, you know, Andy's already nodded about your own house. If we were looking at, you know, gangs, it could be that, you know, we go to the police headquarters to kind of meet there. So I think, again, obviously we need to bear in mind where we are in terms of COVID restrictions, but, you know, let's just see what we can do and when we can do it. But one thing I would like to try and schedule in, Chair, whilst I've got Andy sat here and I can have him recorded on YouTube, is we do need to schedule in this year when we're going to look at safeguarding children. So, Andy, when would be a good time?
We are the Wood Review. Sir Alan Wood, who's the national lead, was asked by government to review the current arrangements. And I'm just looking at a report that we're taking to the executive. I think really any time in the, I don't know, in the autumn.
November
would be great. That would give us that would allow for the opportunity for us to reflect it on the national review, and we will have also completed our annual report and planning cycle, so members could really get into the detail of those arrangements and what's happening in the county.
And so, given that if we schedule that in for November, I can now also email to the Chief Constable and also to Marion Andrews-Evans to get into their diaries, so that they hopefully will be able to attend, so you'll be able to talk directly with them about their role on the safeguarding executive as well.
Yes. My recollection from last time is that we spent about 2 hours on that agenda item when it was previously considered. So I think it's important that we don't overcrowd the agenda for that particular meeting with other topics. Good. Okay, I'm just going to check for other hands. I can't see any other hands. So if...
Chair, there's something else that I meant to, whilst I've got Andy and have him recorded, is that one of the offline briefings that I think would be really helpful for the committee to have is learning from serious case reviews. So
yeah, we've got something on that.
So what timing, Andrew, on that?
Well, we've got an overview now, Chair. The serious case reviews have been replaced by what are called child safeguarding practice reviews and rapid reviews. And in fact, locally we met with the chair of the national panel, who were very pleased with the arrangements that we put in place. So we're pretty much ready for, it would be Dave Jones, who's the business manager of the shared safeguarding arrangements, to pull together an offline briefing, really, when members when members want that. We can really fit in with you on that one.
Okay, so I'll take that one forward on behalf of committee members, if that's okay then. And I've also
yes, that would be good.
You've reminded members about the 2nd of July budget briefing. I just also wanted to reassure members that I am still waiting on dates for the children and young people mental health briefing. It takes a while to get dates because we pull in people from not only GCC, CCG, Gloucestershire Health and Care, but also from TIC Plus as well. So it takes a while to kind of identify dates across all of those organisations. But as soon as I've got the dates, I will send them out.
Great, thank you very much. Good. Well, I think we've had a good first member development session. I think we've kind of given an overview, we've introduced the ambassadors, and we've considered the work programme, certainly for the next 3 or 4 meetings. So I think we've achieved a lot this morning. I trust that future meetings will be able to be held this prompt and succinct. So I think that's a success. And so I'd just like to thank everybody for coming. Thank you.